Every patch, practically without fail, we as a player base will receive survey results from Lucky Mancho, which provides information on the rising and falling active player count, as well as interaction rates for newly released pieces of content. We just got patch 7.4 2 months ago, and whilst it was positively received by many who were already logging into the game on a regular basis, me included, the question that stands is whether it did enough to bring people back into the fold who may have fallen out of love with Square Enix's MMORPG for whatever reason. I always find these things really interesting, and whilst a lot of people love to use them as a way to either doom and gloom about the game, or to argue that it should be utterly immune to criticism, I find it quite interesting to see the trends that you can clearly track, and also when any odd outliers occur. Before we take a proper look at it, I have to give a disclaimer. This is a fan-made census and is not official in any way, and because of that, the numbers won't be 100% entirely accurate. It's generally put together based on player achievement data, and because of privacy settings and some back-end weirdness, you're always going to run into cases where a small percentage are not properly counted. Statistics will usually be projections at first before they're fully confirmed a little later down the road too, so the numbers might shift a tad over time. Either way, it's the best we've got, and it provides a mostly accurate picture of what's going on with the game right now. So, here's the chart with information up to date for February 23rd, 2026, just a couple of days ago at the time of posting. You can check for specific values, but we're going to look to the nearest 10,000 just to make things a bit easier. As of right now, we are seeing a rough active global player count of 930,000 players. Active characters are defined as characters whose most recent updated gear set includes item level 700, or where experience points have changed since the previous survey a couple of months ago. When patch 7.3 released, that number sat somewhere around 880k, and when the last census before this was taken at the end of November, it had dipped all the way down to 820k. So, since the end of November, FF14 has regained around 110,000 players, and has increased past the player count of August 2025 entirely. One thing I do find quite interesting about this is the fact that these returnees are somewhat skewed towards Western regions. JP account for about 20,000 of them, with EU taking more than 25k despite being a comparatively smaller data center, and North American players accounting for almost 65,000 of that increase. It's quite impressive, really. You could look at the trend data and attempt to draw conclusions about the player habits and expectations of Western gamers versus those from Japan, and it would surely be very interesting if you wanted to, but that's not something I'm going to do today. What we can confirm, though, is that players are up from 7.3, and trending in a positive short-term direction, but they still remain overall down from 7.2 in the first half of the expansion. Attrition hasn't necessarily been reverted entirely, but this is good. The last census saw a 6-year low for active players, slightly higher than practically any point in the pre-Shadowbringers era, but lower than anything we've seen from the 5.x and 6.x cycles. If you want to support discussions about FF14 like this one, please do consider subscribing as a side note. It really makes a difference for me. The number of new characters joining the game has increased, with around 60,000 new Warriors of Light this time around. That's up very slightly from both 7.2 and 7.3, implying that 7.4 has acted as more of a draw to bring people into the fold than the last couple of patches were able to. You could argue that 7.4 has a handful of very attractive draws in fairness. For returning players, you have the Heavyweight and Savage raid tier, and in a week or two we'll be getting the Variant and Criterion dungeons as well. Exciting pieces of endgame content for returners to get their teeth stuck into. For those that don't raid, and also for new players alike, I don't want to understate how key the loosening of glamour restrictions arguably could have been. For a game with an ever-increasing focus on self-expression and pushing player interaction and creating subcultures among small communities with one another, allowing free reign to make their characters look closer to how they want them to be is absolutely huge. I could definitely see it being one of the reasons for a percentage of both of those new and returning players being there. One thing that is really important to note about new players is they aren't really new, and that there is a subset of new and free trial player that is not counted by Lucky Bancho at all. These players are those that have reached Shadowbringers, so they need to have invested a decent amount of time to be counted, and also spent money on the game. It's also important to mention that there was a free logging campaign last month as well, taking place from January 9th to February 9th, and if those players returned and fulfilled the requirements of the Lucky Bancho census, they will be counted amongst the returners as well. So whilst the number of players has drastically increased, it is possible that not all of them are paying members and some were just taking advantage of a free opportunity to catch up and dip into the world of Eorzea again for a little while, and that they've since left again. The number of returning players who were inactive over the last period but active in this one has also, unsurprisingly, increased up about 80,000 from the last census in November to a total of about 210k right now. This lines up because the type of content offerings this patch has are primarily directed at returners, and I feel that my personal excitement was far higher for 7.4 than it was for 7.3, and it does seem that this sentiment was somewhat shared by the community at large. To an extent, this is expected, seeing as 7.3 hasn't been a particularly strong return point for those that had already dipped, whereas 7.4 very much is. Even patches are in general more bombastic and exciting than odd ones, and this tracks. So, what does all this mean really? Does it mean the game is saved, or is it dead? Well, neither. FF14 has always been in a pretty decent place, even during the doldrums of the mid-expansion quiet period. Whilst player counts dipped significantly in Dawntrail, more so than they have in half a decade, and public opinion shifted somewhat to match that, the game still holds a strong position as one of the most popular and well-respected MMOs on the market, and is majorly successful considering it's one of the few to maintain a monthly sub-cost in a market that wouldn't support it from many of its competitors. I believe we're coming out of the end of that downtime slowly but surely now, and whilst we may see another small dip come 7.5, that will without a doubt build momentum and grow into a fairly substantial player increase as 7.55 comes out and the lead up to whatever expansion 8.0 has to offer us starts beginning its marketing push. There's only up from here, at least for the short-term foreseeable future. With that said, it's hard to ignore Dawntrail. This expansion has, like I said, seen a shift in public opinion regarding the game, as what was previously immediately accepted as a comfortable pacing of content that people saw as familiar has instead reached the point for many of being too samey and monotonous. With the story getting such a mixed reception and many of the non-raid options falling flat on their face this expansion, the key example being Occult Crescent's first zone, the Square Enix team are on the back foot for the first time in many, many years. They're in a state where they are working to wow players and gain trust back, rather than coasting on a tried and tested format and lapping up the rewards of the rampant critical and commercial acclaim from Shadowbringers and Endwalker. Secretly, I think it's a good thing, if I'm being real with you. They acknowledge this and take it on the chin. To regurgitate something I said a handful of months ago on the matter, Yoshida has sounded reflective, sometimes apologetic, and both open and honest about aspects of the game that could have been handled better. He's spoken extensively in interviews with journalists about the team's mentality shifting, that the game is about to undergo drastic changes, and that the developers have taken things for granted and are re-evaluating everything from the ground up that they've just assumed would remain static forever until now. All of this is good because a reflective, communicative Square Enix is one that can make FF14 the very best it can be. Side note on that, please bloody announce patch 7.45 already. It's supposed to be a week and a half at most out by now, and we haven't heard a peep. If patch 7.4 is anything to go by, the future could well be bright. I genuinely think we've gotten some of the coolest fights in a long time, and that the battle content in the game just keeps raising the bar consistently, and the Glamour unlock showed me that Square Enix can change their tune. They are capable of changing habits in pursuit of positive change. Maybe next expansion, we'll get some additions to the character customization to augment those Glamour updates. We'll see. New season is coming soon, and honestly, pretty excited for it. Please do consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube member like these fine folk. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.